7 days ago, I started a challenge to make $1,000 selling gaming PCs. At the start, I had zero profit, no completed sales for the challenge, and just the idea of building this into a real business. But by the end of the first week, the total profit hit $1,320. And the interesting part is, this week wasn't about selling PCs, it was about building the systems behind the business from scratch, such as the content, the website, the inventory, the branding, the tracking, and eventually the first real sales. So in this video, I'm going to break down everything that happened in week one, what worked, what didn't, and how we ended up passing the original goal in just 7 days. The challenge itself is simple. The goal was to make $1,000 by selling gaming PCs, upgrading systems, and trading GPUs. Documenting the entire process publicly was a part of it, and every deal, every change in inventory, and every dollar of the profit got tracked. And I also wanted to build this into a real business, not just make some random sales. That meant creating the actual infrastructure behind it. A brand, a website, social media pages, financial tracking, inventory systems, and a content strategy that could consistently bring in attention and customers. So week one became a mix of business setup and actual sales execution. What made this week interesting is that it didn't start with money, it started with structure. The first few days were mostly spent building the foundation because without systems, content, and organization, the business would be harder to grow once deals actually started coming in. So the beginning of the week was slower in terms of profit, but those early days ended up making the later results possible. Day one was about setting up the foundation of the business. There was no profit yet, and honestly, that was expected. Instead of chasing random deals right away, I focused on building the systems that would support everything moving forward. The first thing I did was create template scripts for both the PC content and the journey videos. That was important because I knew content was going to be a major part of how I attract attention, build trust, and eventually bring in customers. After that, I built a weekly posting schedule so I could stay consistent instead of posting randomly. And then I created the financial side of the business: income statements, balance sheets, inventory tracking, and a broader financial breakdown so I could see exactly where my capital was allocated. That included understanding how much of my money was in PC inventory, how much was in cash, and how much was tied up in other assets such as a car. So by the end of day one, profit was still zero, but the business had structure, which was the real goal. Day two was focused heavily on content strategy. At this point, I wanted to figure out how to structure the content side of the business in a way that was actually sustainable and data driven. So I spent some time digging into the TikTok algorithm and testing a posting timetable based on Shopify's recommendations. The goal here wasn't to guess, it was to start with the framework, test it, and then eventually adjust based on actual performance data. One of the biggest takeaways I found was that content tends to perform well in two different ranges, either under 10 seconds or over a minute. So from that point on, the strategy became extremely clear. All of the PC and GPU content would be short form, under 10 seconds, designed to be quick, punchy, and easy to consume. And all of the journey content would be longer than a minute, so there's enough time to actually tell the story and show the progress. I also started recording the content the day before it goes live. That let me set up automated uploads and made the whole system more consistent. Instead of relying on motivation every day, the schedule could do the heavy lifting. And on top of that, I recorded all 21 PC videos for week one, which was a huge step because it meant the first full week of content was already ready. I also finalized the brand name, created the logo, and purchased the domain. So by the end of day two, profit was still zero, but now the business had direction, content systems, and branding. Day three was about organizing the business so it could operate more professionally. The first thing I did was organize and list all of the GPUs. That was the most important because inventory only helps if you actually know what you have, where it is, and how it fits into future builds or upgrades. After that, I created the official social media accounts for the business. That made the brand feel more real and gave the content somewhere to live outside of just planning documents. Then I set up a Google Workspace using the domain that I bought. That gave the business a proper email and a more professional backend for communication and operations. And to get that fully working, I updated the CNAME and MX records of the domain to verify and connect it to Google correctly. These aren't flashy steps, but they matter because they turn the project from an idea into something that actually looks and operates like a real business. So again, by the end of day three, profit was still zero. But now the inventory was organized, the business accounts existed, and the professional infrastructure was in place. Day four was the turning point. After 3 days of building systems and doing work in the background, this was the day the challenge finally produced its first actual result. I made the first sale of the challenge through a GPU trade. The deal was an RTX 4080 Super, which I traded for an RTX 4070 Super plus cash. After breaking down the numbers, that deal generated $510 in profit. And that was a big moment because it immediately pushed the challenge to more than halfway towards the original goal of $1,000. That one trade also validated the process. It showed that all the setup work from the first few days wasn't wasted. It was building towards real transactions. Outside of that deal, I also spent time organizing the current PC builds and parts inventory so I had a better understanding of what was ready to sell and what could still be upgraded. I also worked on the website and created the Facebook business page, which gave the brand another platform for visibility and listings. By the end of day 4, the total profit had gone from $0 to a $510 increase. Day 5 was less about sales and more about making the business easier for customers to find and trust. The main focus was the website. The day before, I had already built the base foundation, the theme colors, the logo integration, and the homepage layout. On day 5, I finished the homepage and made it much more complete. I added a carousel section showing GPU brands, which helps visually communicate the kind of hardware the business is focused on. I also added a review section, which will become more valuable over time as more customers come in and more feedback gets collected. And beyond the website, I also created the Google Business Profile. At that point, it was still waiting for verification, but it was another major step because once verified, it would help the business show up more easily in search and on maps. So profit at the end of day 5 was still 510, no new deals that day, but the business was becoming much more visible and much more credible. Day 6 was another major milestone because this was the day the website was mostly complete and officially published. That was important because up until now, the business had pieces: inventory, branding, content, social media, and systems. But now I had a central place online where everything could come together. The site gives people a place to learn about the business, view the brand properly, and eventually browse available systems and services. At this stage, the majority of the website was finished. There were still some small improvements left to make, especially around SEO optimization and minor refinements. But getting it published was a big move because it made the business publicly accessible in a much more professional way. Day 7 was the biggest day of the week. Coming into the day, the total profit was still $510, which already had the challenge over halfway to the original goal. But today, we made 2 separate sales that completely changed the scoreboard. The first sale was a gaming PC. The customer had specific preferences, so before finalizing the sale, I swapped out the power supply and the NVMe drive to match what they wanted. That's something I think is really important in this business. Sometimes a sale isn't just about having a PC ready, it's about making the final adjustments that help the customer feel like they're getting exactly what they want. After that sale was completed, the profit from that build came out to $735. Then later in the day, I also sold an RX 6750 XT by installing it into another system, which added another $75 in profit. So between those 2 sales, the total challenge profit reached $1,320. That officially pushed the challenge past the original $1,000 target. And while those sales were happening, I also continued improving the website. I added a section explaining the trade-in process, which makes it easier for consumers to understand how trades work. I also added a location section so people know exactly where the service operates. By the end of day 7, the challenge had gone from $0 to $1,320. Looking back at the first week, I think the biggest lesson is that the early setup work mattered more than it seemed at that time. At the beginning, profit was sitting at 0 for multiple days, and if you only looked at that number, it would have felt like nothing was happening. But in reality, those days were building the systems, the content pipeline, the brand, the inventory organization, the website, and the online presence. And once those were in place, everything else became easier. Another big takeaway is that this business isn't only about finding parts and selling them, it's also about presentation, trust, and consistency. The website matters, the branding matters, the content matters, the systems matter. Everything matters because all of those things make it easier for consumers to take the business seriously. And finally, the week reinforced that even one good trade can change everything. The first GPU deal immediately moved the challenge forward in a major way, over the halfway mark. So week 1 is officially complete. The original target was $1,000 and the total ended at $1,320. That means the next goal is no longer 1,000, it's 5,000. And going into week 2, the focus is going to be on building more inventory, finding better deals, improving their website even further, and continuing to grow the brand around the business. This is still just the beginning. If you want to follow the journey as I keep building this business, subscribe and come back for week 2. I'm documenting the entire process in real time, including the deals, the numbers, the wins, and the mistakes. And now that the first goal is complete, the next target is what you're waiting for. Let's see how far this can go.